she was a massive fan of Steve Jobs, hence my turtleneck today, because she would...
But her turtleneck too.
She kind of transformed herself to like a geeky kind of dressing, person. And she got a transformation from, it's raining here. She got a transformation from that and started dressing really sleek like Steve. She actually had an interesting thing where she had a really deep baritone voice. And if you look up some of the interviews with her, it's striking, her voice. You don't expect it from her stature.
It like knocks you back. You're like, whoa, wasn't expecting that.
And some of the way she talks in some of her speeches, it's almost hypnotic.
It is.
The tone and the rhythm of it.
Well, it's like strikes you at first, so you're like kind of engaged. You're kind of into the conversation with her, and then takes you on this like just sort of calm journey and getting you excited about her product. And you can definitely see that sort of sales skill that is just inherent to her nature.
So he, as in Steve Jobs, had a big effect on her way of operating. He had a famous reality distortion field where he said, I want a mouse that moves around without a ball in it. Make it, or...
No, I want a mouse.
Yeah, sorry. I want a mouse, and I want it tomorrow, and he'd scare people and say, like, you can do it,
What's a mouse? Like,
and
you imagine a mouse without a mouse existing?
Yeah. So
as we know it today.
And then he'd kind of /bully/ inspire some combination of the two, these brilliant engineers to make these things. But he kind of pushed them just beyond their limits, and she saw that and tried to embody that herself. So, for example, she would refuse to use any more blood than a tiny droplet of, tiny vial of blood, even though that would have significantly made it much easier for the engineers to actually invent something that worked.
Well, it's not the story that they were selling, She set the sort of minimum viable product at kind of the ultimate product. In reality, like she refused to give concessions, probably on an exaggerated version of what she was probably inspired by from Steve Jobs. I actually watched the other day. It was, I think, Steve coming back into Apple, post Next, and then being invited to come back in after Apple were going down the gurgler, and the initial launch of the new ad campaign, and it was amazing. It was such a great conversation. He rolls into this room of, I'm not sure whether it was investors and or just general public members or company members, but he just tells his story. He comes out in shorts. He's got like Birkenstocks on, and just tells his story of the journey they've been on for the last, 13 weeks. And it was the launch of the
iMac that...
No, it was the ad campaign to start shifting the brand name of Apple. And it was the famous one that had all of the really notable people from history, where they had to go back into the various estates of those individuals. So Muhammad Ali had an ad campaign. It was just literally him, in one of his poses, and it had like the motto, which I can't recall at the moment. It's
Think different.
Think different. That was it. That's it. And had all of these great characters and people throughout time, and just completely started shifting Apple towards the brand from being this, more corporate centered technology company, because it was tending towards what I guess IBM probably was at the time, and then
more aspiration,
and shifted it towards being a vision for different people.
But it was kind of beyond that. She was able to convince them to almost believe in her with a religious fervor.
A cult.
Yeah. So some of the people she ended up having on her board were former Secretary of State George Shultz, and he got to the point where one of the whistleblowers was his grandson who ended up working there, but George would believe Elizabeth over his own kin. And all that played out later on, but really intense. Henry Kissinger was on her board at one point. David Boyce, who I've found, who features later in this book, is an incredibly high-powered attorney in America. And James Mattis, who is a war hero and a general. These are really impressive people.
But
and that all helped legitimise things too.
Yeah, well, as soon as you've got, again, that credibility backing, you've got a story to tell, you know, and it's I was just looking at what it's called, the investor's quandary. You know, it's the classic fear of missing out. Very human need.
We all experience it, no doubt. So there's all sorts of crazy stories in the book, but they became progressively more paranoid and committed way more fraud, and it just sort of snowballed. So enter John Carreyrou, who started to get tip-offs from ex-employees and a few others, and he started investigating the business quite hard, and it was very hard to do because they'd really tied things up, and it was a darling, this business of Silicon Valley. She's a genius, etc. And this is where David Boyce starts coming after her really hard. So he effectively tries to strong-arm the publication into not selling this story, saying you're revealing trade secrets, you don't understand, this sort of stuff. And they kept strong and they released an article.
Yeah, and the book itself. But This is the Wall Street Journal, right? Which is getting pressured by David Boyce, and you know
he's a really powerful person.
Would have put the pressure on, but you imagine this guy really being at the pinnacle of the pressure being applied to the individual employees as they are being made to disappear within the company. Like this guy represented Al Gore in Bush versus Al Gore. He represented the US in US versus Microsoft. He represented, it was for the invalidation of Proposition 8 in California, which was trying to oppose same-sex marriage. Like he's a very high-level influential lawyer.
Someone else she was able to get on side.
But what is so wrong in this situation, right, is that he's a board member. He's a shareholder, heavily invested in the company. So primary method of him getting paid was via equity.
Stock price means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was invested in the outcomes of the company, which means he has like full buy-in. He would put enough pressure on all these individuals to set up this secrecy, which stemmed from the sort of paranoia of Elizabeth and Sonny. So there was never any way of sort of any legal issues happening here.